Lesson 56. Our neighbour, the river. We'll talk about how important a river might be in our lives in this lesson. First, listen to the text and answer this question. Why had the neighbours left their farm? 他们的邻居为什么离开农场？
The river, which forms the eastern boundary of our farm, has always played an important part in our lives. Without it, we could not make a living. There is only enough spring water to supply the needs of the house, so we have to pump from the river for farm use. We tell the river all our secrets. We know instinctively, just as beekeepers with their bees, that misfortune might overtake us if the important events of our lives were not related to it. We have special river birthday parties in the summer. Sometimes we go upstream to a favorite backwater. Sometimes we have our party at the boathouse, which a predecessor of ours at the farm built in the meadow hard by the deepest pool for swimming and diving. In a heat wave, we choose a midnight birthday party, and that is the most exciting of all. We welcome the seasons by the riverside, crowning the youngest girl with flowers in the spring, holding a summer festival on Midsummer Eve, giving thanks for the harvest in the autumn, and throwing a holy wreath into the current in the winter. After a long period of rain, the river may overflow its banks. This is a rare occurrence, as our climate seldom goes to extremes. We are lucky in that only the lower fields, which make up a very small proportion of our farm, are affected by flooding. But other farms are less favorably sited, and flooding can sometimes spell disaster for their owners. One bad winter, we watched the river creep up the lower meadows. All the cattle had been moved into stalls, and we stood to lose little. We were, however, worried about our nearest neighbours, whose farm was low-lying and who were newcomers to the district. As the floods had put the telephone out of order, we could not find out how they were managing. From an attic window, we could get a sweeping view of the river where their land joined ours, and at the most critical juncture, we took turns in watching that point. The first sign of disaster was a dead sheep floating down. Next came a horse, swimming bravely, but we were afraid that the strength of the current would prevent its landing anywhere before it became exhausted. Suddenly, a raft appeared, looking rather like Noah's Ark, carrying the whole family, a few hens, the dogs, a cat, and a bird in a cage. We realized that they must have become unduly frightened by the rising flood, for their house, which had sound foundations, would have stood stoutly even if it had been almost submerged. The men of our family waded down through our flooded meadows with boat hooks, in the hope of being able to grapple a corner of the raft and pull it out of the current towards our bank. We still think it a miracle that they were able to do so.
So why had the neighbours left their farm? They had left their farm because they were afraid that their house would be flooded. But the author actually tells us that they needn't be so afraid. They had tried all their best in order to help their neighbours. This text actually not only tells us about their human neighbour, but more importantly about their common natural neighbour, the river, just as the title goes. The first paragraph explains its significance to our lives, and the second paragraph tells us about all the festivities they have about the river. But the experience in the flood makes us know that they treated their human neighbours with no less warmth. Okay, now we'll look at some language points. The river which forms the eastern boundary of our farm. Boundary refers to an imaginary line making the edge or limit. 就是假想的界限。 For example, we crossed the national boundary at midnight. National boundary, 国界线. The boundary between Europe and Asia. 欧洲和亚洲的界限。在一个界限之内 we use the preposition within. For example, within the city boundary. When boundary is used in plural form, it means the limits of a subject. For example, the boundaries of human knowledge, 人类知识的界限. The boundaries of history and storytelling are always being blurred. 是指历史和讲故事之间的界限，界限变得模糊，动词通常用 blur. The misfortune might overtake us. Overtake means happen to somebody, especially suddenly and unexpectedly. For example, the family was overtaken by tragedy 5 years ago, and they still have not recovered, which means tragedy happened to the family 5 years ago. Overtake can also mean surpass or to go past, 超过. Always check in your rear view mirror before you overtake. 超车前一定要检查后视镜. If the important events of our lives were not related to it. Here, relate means tell. If we didn't tell the river about the important events, then misfortune might happen to us. I'll give you another example. In this novel, the author relates the life story of a tramp, which means the author tells about the life story of a tramp. Notice relate is more formal and literary than tell. Which a predecessor of ours at the farm built in the meadow. A predecessor of somebody means somebody who did the job before. In this text, it refers to somebody who lived there before. If it is the predecessor of something or some machine, it means the former, 前身. I'll give you 2 examples. Unlike his predecessor, the present director takes a very practical approach. His predecessor, 他的前任. The latest model of the car is not only faster than its predecessors, but also more comfortable. 这个车型的前身. In the middle, hard by the deepest pool. Hard by is a fixed expression, meaning very near. For example, the house where he lived as a child is hard by the palace, is very close by the palace. We welcome the seasons by the riverside, crowning the youngest girls with flowers, which means to put flowers on the head of the youngest girl. So crown, when being used as a verb, means to wear something at the top of the head. Crown 做名词的时候，我们知道是王冠。If being used as a verb, its basic meaning is to put a crown at somebody's head. For example, Queen Elizabeth II was crowned in 1953. 伊丽莎白女王二世是1953年加冕的。We can also crown something. For example, the church was crowned with golden domes, which means the golden domes were put at the top of the church. The river may overflow its banks. Overflow means may flow over its banks. Let's look at more examples. The washing machine is overflowing all over the kitchen floor. The water in the washing machine is coming out of it. We can also use overflow to describe people. For example, the pub was so full that people were overflowing into the street. People were coming out and going into the street. We can also use overflow to describe some feeling. For example, suddenly her anger overflowed. Suddenly she lost her temper. This is a rare occurrence. Occurrence means happening. We can often say a common or regular occurrence, or if it does not happen very often, a rare occurrence. Let's look at more examples. Street fights are an everyday occurrence in this part of the city. Street fights happen every day. The nation had suffered greatly from the frequent occurrence of earthquakes, which means earthquakes frequently occurred in this nation. The lower fields, which make up a very small proportion. Make up means constitute or occupy, 占有. Let's look at one more example. Women officials made up only 10% of the civil servants. Occupied only 10%. The committee is made up of representatives from every state, is constituted by, or is composed by. Other farms are less favorably sited, which means other farms are less advantageously sited. We'll look at more examples. She impressed me favorably at the interview. She left me a good impression. Our products compare favorably with all the leading brands. Our products are better than, or at least as good as, all the leading brands. Notice favorably usually go together with these verbs. Favorably sited. Be sited means be located. The hotel is sited at the foot of the hill. The hotel is located at the foot of the hill. Flooding can sometimes spell disaster for their owners. Spell disaster. Spell means to have something unpleasant as a result. So spell disaster means make the disaster happen. We'll look at more examples. The recent fall in house prices has spelled disaster for many people wanting to sell their houses. 房价一落，这就成为了很多想卖房子的人的灾难。This evening's defeat has spelled doom for the team's hope of winning the competition. So this evening's defeat was a doom for the team, so that the team had no hope of winning the competition. We watched the river creep up the lower meadows. So here, creep up means run slowly to the lower meadows. The basic meaning of creep up is to go up slowly, 慢慢地爬上去. For example, you will see ivy creeping up the walls of the building in springtime. 常春藤爬在墙上. Over the last year, the rate of inflation has crept up to almost 7%. Creep up, if used figuratively, means to increase very slowly. 去年通货膨胀率渐渐地涨到7%. We stood to lose little. Stand here means be or get into a state or situation. So we stood to lose little means we lost little or we didn't lose much. I'll give you more examples. Our company stands to lose a lot of money if the deal is unsuccessful. Our company will lose a lot of money. We stand to gain or we stand to win a lot if our plans get approved. 我们的计划要是得到批准 we will gain a lot. Whose farm was low-lying? Low-lying means low in altitude, 低洼的. For example, we can say low-lying land or low-lying hills. 低洼地 和低低的丘陵。Look at this example. People living in low-lying areas were evacuated because of the floods. 住在低洼地区的人们被命令迁走。The floods had put the telephone out of order. The floods had made the telephone stop working. Put can mean to make something or cause something into a certain condition. We'll look at more such collocations. For example, I'm not going to put my children at risk. Put my children at risk. To cause my children in a situation that is risky. The new policy has put a lot of workers out of job. Put somebody out of a job means to cause somebody to lose job. To find out how they were managing. Manage means how they were dealing with such a difficult situation. For example, we can say, are you sure that you can manage on yourself? Are you sure you are able to handle the situation? After her parents were retired, they had to manage on her brother's salary. They had to deal with such a situation with her brother's salary. We could get a sweeping view of the river. 扫视. Sweeping here means all-inclusive or a large-scale view. We'll look at more examples to see the meaning of sweeping. Before he started, the speaker gave the crowd a sweeping glance. A sweeping glance, 扫视. His latest novel has a sweeping historical narrative. The nation carried out a sweeping reform in the late 80s. Sweeping here means thorough, complete. The party did not win the sweeping victory as they expected. Sweeping victory, victory on a large scale, or complete victory. At the most critical juncture, critical here means the most crucial moment. For example, the experiment is at a crucial point. We'll know the result in an hour. 是在最紧要的关头。Your support is critical to our project. 对什么事情关键？用介词 to. In these two examples, critical has other meanings. This is a critical essay on modern paintings. 评论性的文章。Do you have to be so critical of me all the time? Do you have to be so picky on me? 挑剔的。At the most critical juncture, juncture means a point in time. It's a formal word. For example, at this juncture, it's impossible to say whether the patient will make a full recovery. 现在, at this juncture means at this moment of time. We took turns in watching that point. Take turns means you do things one after another. So here it means we watched that point one after another. Let's look at more examples. We take turns to do the cooking. I'll do this one day and you will follow the other day. 轮流做饭. I'm tired. Do you want to have a turn? Or do you want to take a turn? Do you want to succeed? 你想不想来接着做? If you give the wrong answer, you have to miss a turn, which means you will not be given the turn this time. They must have become unduly frightened. Unduly means more than that is necessary or reasonable. So become unduly frightened means they have become more frightened than necessary. I'll give you more examples. There is no need to be unduly pessimistic about the situation. There's no need to be too much pessimistic. She didn't seem unduly concerned about her son's health. which means she was not concerned to an unreasonable degree. Which had sound foundations. Sound here means be in good condition. Let's look at more examples of sound in this sense. His body is very sound considering his age. His body is very healthy. Was she of sound mind after the accident? Was she mentally still healthy? He supported his proposal with sound arguments. Sound arguments means well-grounded arguments, well-made arguments. Are you a sound sleeper? A sound sleeper, 睡觉沉的人. We have mentioned before how adverbs can actually serve the function of a clause. This text has more examples. Other farms are less favorably cited. So the adverb favorably actually gives us a very important information, which is about the less advantageous position of the other farms. They must have become unduly frightened. The adverb unduly tells us that their fear was groundless. They were actually secure. Would have stood stoutly. Stoutly tells us about the solid foundation of their house, which is the objective fact that is also essential to the story. The horse is described as swimming bravely. Here it's different from the above two examples. It's a common usage of the adverb, but it's used to describe a horse. It's called personification. 其实是拟人的用法. Coming back to the text itself, I guess it's not difficult for us to understand the content, since in our own culture there are two great rivers, Yangtze River and the Yellow River, and we have always regarded the Yellow River as the mother river. Actually, in ancient times, rivers had been the origins of civilizations. For example, Egypt was founded on River Nile, 尼罗河, and India on River Ganges, 恒河. Rivers are important in England as well. We all know the famous river Thames. It is called Father Thames by the British people. In America, of course, the most important river is the Mississippi. If you want to know more about the river, maybe you can try to read Mark Twain's book, which is entitled Life on the Mississippi. Right, so much on rivers. I'll see you next time.